Crusader Kings 3 is a grand strategy video game in which you lead your noble dynasty through the Middle Ages by expanding your influence, strengthening your family through alliances and careful preparation, all while growing your empire. It's part map painter, part RPG, and part eugenics simulator, beloved by thousands of history nerds and neurodivergents. That Venn diagram is almost a circle. Playing this game always leads me to think about the dynasties that have seen their rise and fall in America over the years. Some, like the Rockefellers, still have intact fortunes but don't have as much cultural cachet. Others have seen their empires crumble and names co-signed to the dustbin of history. There's a lot of fading stars out there, but one definitely still recognized by most American people: the Kennedys. In just two short generations, the Kennedys went from a Boston area political outfit to national icons that still capture the hearts and minds of the American people decades later. However, much like the country itself, the Kennedy political dynasty has entered its decay stage. A family that boasted presidents, senators, titans of industry now produces crackpots, fail sons, and political losers. A shame, really, but the Kennedy story is certainly not finished. Call me Sleepy Joe, because I think we can build this family back better using the skills I've developed and the techniques I've learned thanks to the Crusader Kings series. Now, before I take hold of the Kennedy dynasty and revive their political and cultural prospects, we need to see where the family has been, how they've won, and why they're losing now. So, with that, it's time for some Kennedy family history. The Kennedy family dynasty begins with Patrick Joseph Kennedy, born in Boston, Massachusetts on January 14th, 1858. For organizational purposes, we'll refer to this founding Kennedy generation as K1. Kennedy thrived as a businessman in his early adulthood, with his ownership of several classic Irish businesses, saloons, and whiskey importation firms. With enough influence and money earned there, PJ would go on to have a strong run as a Democratic politician for the Boston area, winning elections to the Massachusetts House and Senate. PJ Kennedy and his wife Mary have a couple darling babes: Joseph Patrick Kennedy Sr., Francis Benedict Kennedy, Mary Loretta Kennedy, and Margaret Louise Kennedy. As far as the Crusader Kings run goes, PJ has given us a fantastic start. He's accumulated some wealth, built up some power and prestige, and secured his succession plan with his firstborn son, Joseph Kennedy Sr. And what an heir Joseph Kennedy Sr. would be. After the time of PJ Kennedy, we have K2, the first generation of Kennedys born into a family with political relevance and prestige. The most important of this crop is Joseph Patrick Kennedy Sr., born in 1888. This man is the real reason we know the Kennedy family name today. Joseph sets the mold for the classic Kennedy archetype we know as well: Ivy League educated, wealthy, politically influential, and of course, habitually unfaithful. After graduating from Harvard, a Kennedy family favorite in the coming years, Joseph secures an alliance with the Fitzgeralds, another Boston area political family, and marries childhood sweetheart Rose Fitzgerald. In true Irish Catholic fashion, they have 9 children. More on them later. Joseph Kennedy takes an already cushy start and runs up that score. He amasses a wealth in the hundreds of millions, which in today's money would make him a billionaire, with interests in every industry you could imagine: banking, real estate investment, liquor importing, even theater and film. It's also during this time in Hollywood that Joe Kennedy is slinging major peen across town, having extramarital affairs with famous actress Gloria Swanson and his personal secretary, an old favorite of the time.
You were married when you met Joe Kennedy, and you were in love with your husband.
Yes.
And you had an affair with Joe Kennedy. For how long?
Well, when he came into my life, he went out of it and came back and went out. He was always trying to, no matter what happened, there he was.
For all accounts I could find, Joe's father, PJ Kennedy, was faithful to his wife, so I think the legendary Kennedy tradition of cocksmithery is first forged here by Joe Kennedy. Besides having access to the best strange one could get in the early 20th century, Joe's incredible wealth, and the influence that comes with it, also allows him to begin his own political career. After fundraising and donating to FDR's first presidential campaign, Joseph Kennedy Sr. is tapped to be the first chairman of the newly created SEC. Further support for FDR earns him the role of chairman of the U.S. Maritime Commission and eventually the ambassador to the United Kingdom.
A new ambassador to Britain, Mr. Joseph Kennedy. GB News interviewed him on his arrival at the American Embassy.
Just arrived in England after a very pleasant trip. I'm looking forward with great anticipation to my duties here and to renewing acquaintanceship with many old friends.
It's not insane to think Joseph could have been on his way to his own presidential run had he not suffered from what modern doctors would refer to now as rampant fascist and anti-Semitic tendencies. Joseph goes a little too buck wild in his time in the UK, dropping some wild quotes like, "Democracy is finished in England. It may be here," referring to the United States. It won't surprise you that the man was a big fan of Hitler as well. So maybe not the greatest of guys on that end. I think Joseph falls into the category of anti-Semite that most of the rich white dudes at the time do. They are more bitter and jealous that they don't control the whole world themselves and are pissed at people that they think do. Kennedy seems like he would believe that Jews controlled the weather, but was only really mad about that because he wanted to own the weather control machine himself. Either way, these public comments and personal beliefs end up getting him kicked out of the ambassadorship and ending his political career at a national level.
I am returning to Washington to report to the President. I leave England at this time with real regret.
But all that money and influence is perfectly poised to set up the next generation of Kennedys for further national dominance. We now arrive at the third generation of Kennedys, aka K3. This is the golden age of Kennedys, baby. All the big names we are so familiar with and maybe not so familiar with are here. All the work of Joseph Sr. pays off in spades in this generation of Kennedys. He's got the cash, but not the insane cultural cachet that his children will have. His children will also each have trust funds that will ensure they never have to worry about money or having a real job for the rest of their lives. In total, for K3, we have Joseph Kennedy Jr., John F. Kennedy, Rosemary Kennedy, Kathleen Kick Kennedy, Eunice Kennedy, Patricia Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Jean Kennedy, and finally, good old Ted Kennedy. First up is Joseph Kennedy Jr., born in 1914. Joseph Kennedy Sr., having screwed up his own political career, eyes his firstborn Joe Jr. as the potential first president. However, those plans go awry due to Joseph Jr. being shot down over England during World War II while serving as a fighter pilot. It's this death that marks the beginning of the Kennedy curse, in my opinion. I don't know if Joe Sr. dicked down and then ghosted a shamanist or reneged on a promise to carry a fortune teller up a mountain, but the tragedy suffered in the third generation of Kennedys is what destroys this power program of his. Thankfully, Joseph's got a couple more sons, including our golden boy Jack. John F. Kennedy is the most famous Kennedy, the real reason we know the Kennedy name today, and is the Kennedy that ascends the highest in the political sphere. He doesn't get as rich as his father, but reaches much higher heights politically, not only thanks to his charm and charisma, but also his father's extensive connections and multi-million-dollar fortune. After completing the Kennedy mandatory chore of graduating from Harvard, JFK was a war hero in World War II, became a House rep for a district out of Boston, then a U.S. Senator from Massachusetts, and then finally president in 1960. Like his father, Kennedy is also addicted to ignoring his wife and spreading his seed like a different traveling Johnny we all know and love. JFK is one of our country's few hot presidents and does such a good job in office, he's assassinated by the CIA. His smoke was too tough, his bitch was too bad, his swag was too different, and Allen Dulles killed him for it. Kennedy curse strikes again. Rosemary Kennedy is the third in line and unfortunately most famous for getting lobotomized by her father. She is one of the Kennedys that does live the longest, but her condition post-lobotomy is then what inspires her sister to start the Special Olympics. So, a little silver lining there, maybe? Kathleen Kick Kennedy is the fourth of this generation and another victim of the Kennedy curse. She ends up marrying a member of the British aristocracy, the Marquess of Hartington, in 1944, who then dies 4 months after their wedding while fighting the Germans in France. Her brother had just died a month before, Joe Jr., so just not a great time for young Kathleen here. Tragically, Kick would then go on to perish in a plane crash, a Kennedy curse mainstay as we will see, in 1948 over France. Eunice Kennedy, born 1921, is best known for founding the Special Olympics. Most importantly for our Kennedy-style CK3 run, she marries Sergeant Shriver of the Maryland Shrivers, a storied political family of the region. Patricia Kennedy, born 1924, supports the family's political endeavors in the Golden Era and then also continues to do charity work in her later years. Sixth in line, but second in our hearts, Robert F. Kennedy is born November 1925. Robert is another part of the classic Kennedy mold of this time. Some World War II service, a Harvard degree, followed by a law degree from the University of Virginia. Eventually, RFK gets appointed as U.S. Attorney General in the Kennedy administration because of his astute legal mind and years of experience as a lawyer at the state and federal level. Just kidding. His last name is Kennedy. And whoa, that was the last name of the president. Funny coincidence. After his brother's assassination, he goes on to become U.S. Senator from New York from 1965 all the way to his unfortunate assassination 3 years later in 1968 during his own presidential run. Boy, oh boy, that Kennedy curse is going strong. The next Kennedy of this generation is Jean, born February 1928. In classic Kennedy fashion, she's involved with the campaigns of her older brothers, does some charity work, and ends up becoming U.S. Ambassador to Ireland. Good for her. The final member of K3 is Ted Kennedy. He also takes the usual Kennedy path in his youth, first going Harvard for undergrad, quick stint in the military, then law degree. Ted goes on to have a long career in the U.S. Senate, serving 47 years until his death in 2009. He earns a sick nickname, Lion of the Senate. At the time, he was even considered a possible candidate for president, until of course it comes out he killed a young woman in a driving accident, later known as the Chappaquiddick incident.
I have requested this opportunity to talk to the people of Massachusetts about the tragedy which happened last Friday evening.
Teddy Boy claims he wasn't in a relationship with the young woman at the time and was definitely not drunk, but that really goes against his very nature as a Kennedy. But hey, whoa, what do I know, huh? The heights of this generation of Kennedys set the standard for the family. This generation is the reason the American people know and idolize the family to this day. It's this prestigious generation we will look to emulate and hopefully surpass with careful enough planning. In 1969, Joseph Kennedy dies at the age of 81 in Hyannisport, surrounded by family. At that point, he had already outlived 4 of his children, 2 assassinated by the deep state because they couldn't stand to see 2 crazy-ass Irish-American white boys doing it big. It's at this point the halcyon days of the Kennedy family have ended. Kennedy's massive fortune has now spread across his numerous descendants, and the family now lacks a singular figure with the power and vision to maintain its greatness. These are the conditions the 4th generation of Kennedys must navigate, and unfortunately, they don't navigate them very well. Instead of senators and presidents, this generation's highest political achievement sits at the U.S. House representative level. The 4th generation is chock full of lawyers, journalists, nonprofit merchants, and overall men and women of leisure. Most of the generation follows the classic Kennedy mold, of course. Go to an Ivy League school, get a law degree, maybe snag some TV time and some nonprofit work. The Kennedy curse continues to claim lives, unfortunately, the most prominent of which is JFK Jr., who dies in a plane crash at 38. There are 2 notable members of this generation that we will highlight, as they will figure into our plans later on. The first, Maria Shriver, daughter of Sergeant Shriver and Eunice Kennedy, was a prominent news anchor in the 1980s through the early 2000s until her husband, small-time art house character actor Arnold Schwarzenegger, wins the California governorship. That's right, we're getting some strong blood in the cadet houses of this Kennedy dynasty. As of 2024, the best-known Kennedy now, that is alive, is unfortunately former independent presidential candidate and current crank Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That's right, the man with the golden voice himself is one of the few true-blood Kennedys left in the world that has the Kennedy name. RFK Jr. has the usual beginnings, going to Harvard, later graduating with a law degree, but diverges importantly from the usual Kennedy political path. Instead of the usual, RFK Jr. opts to go into the environmental law, spending the first several decades with various organizations that fight polluters and anti-environment efforts, first in the New York area and then nationally. Robbie gets some impressive wins during this time as an environmental zealot, extracting hundreds of millions of dollars from industrial polluters in successful suit settlements. The environment is RFK Jr.'s area of expertise, and unfortunately is the only area the man makes any sense in. Running concurrent to his stellar environmental law career is his hobby in anti-vaccination crankery. Kennedy knows a lot about environmental policy, but next to nothing regarding public health. He falls for all the usual junk science takes. Vaccine causes autism. The COVID-19 vaccine is the real danger, and even some weird HIV denialism. He's even credited with being a major contributing factor to a measles outbreak in Samoa in the late 2010s. The worm in his brain was definitely working overtime. Starting with his run in 2024 for president, insane story after insane story was released about RFK Jr., many with a common theme: odd deeds with dead animals. In July 2024, we get a picture of him he had texted to a friend where he was eating dead dog. There goes the white vote. In August, a story reveals he was the one who dumped the body of a dead bear cub in Central Park a decade earlier. In September, the National Marine Fisheries Service announced they were investigating a story told by RFK's daughter, which described a time RFK had chainsawed a dead beach whale's head from its body and drove it home strapped to the roof of the family car. But even with all the idiocy, the Kennedy genes are strong in this man. He checks all the boxes: Ivy League educated, wealthy, and of course, womanizing. Throughout his marriages, RFK Jr. was a prolific cheater, never passing up a moment to step outside of his marriage. In a 2001 diary discovered by his ex-wife, who then leaked it to the press amidst their divorce, Kennedy described sexual encounters with 37 women in the year. There's a now famous quote from friends of RFK Jr. that describes him as, quote, a lifelong philanderer. But that was in his younger days. All right, you would think with the onset of spasmodic dysphonia, the neurological condition that causes his unique voice, his lustful encounters would cease. But no! In late September 2024, Olivia Nuzzi, a writer covering the 2024 election for New York Magazine, had reportedly been placed on leave for an inappropriate relationship with a reporting subject. That reporting subject? Robert F. Kennedy Jr., baby. Although no physical interaction had occurred, the two had conducted a digital relationship, sharing texts, photos, and even what some reports have described as intimate FaceTimes. This is how I know the Kennedy charm is potent. Imagine conducting an affair with a man whose voice sounds like you put all your loose change in a blender and then turned it on at the highest setting. Imagine hearing,
"Damn, mama, bust that pussy open on FaceTime,"
and then doing exactly that. That Kennedy sexual charisma infected Olivia Nuzzi's mind to the point she couldn't help but throw away her years-long relationship to another man and her writing career. It's shortly after this that RFK Jr. drops out anyway, but what a wild ride he gave us. Even amongst the decline of the Kennedys, it's good to see its strongest characteristics are being passed down. We now find ourselves at the youngest adult generation of Kennedys, what I'm calling K5. It's from this pool we will need to find our chosen one, the Kennedy destined to return its fated dynasty to glory, a liberal Lisan al-Gaib. The first I'll highlight is Joseph P. Kennedy III of Massachusetts, grandson of Robert F. Kennedy. As of 2024, we find JPK3 on a bit of a downturn. First, he's a House representative from Massachusetts' 4th District for 8 years until a failed bid at Senate washed him out of Congress completely. Joseph P. Kennedy's highest point in politics came when he was chosen to give the 2018 Democratic response to the State of the Union, seen by almost nobody and entirely overshadowed by the little bit of spittle he had on the side of his lip. After his service to the people of Massachusetts and the Democratic Party, Kennedy kicked around a bit before being given a make-work job as a special envoy to Northern Ireland. Regardless of his middling political career, he has a place in our plan for a new Kennedy century. The next Kennedy will focus on maybe the only Kennedy descendant that has a different name that doesn't suck. Patrick Schwarzenegger, eldest son of Maria Shriver and Arnold Schwarzenegger, is an actor best known for Gen V, spin-off from The Boys, or his role in American Sports Story. Patrick, unfortunately, is not as jacked or as famous as his father, which feels like a little bit of a waste, honestly. You have the genetics of your father and access to steroids he can only dream of back in Austria. Why are you otter mode, brother? You are disrespecting your father's legacy every time you can successfully fit in a doorway. Still, he has his most important part to play soon. Finally, we come to the most important Kennedy descendant of this generation, our player heir, the man I think is the Kennedy dynasty's last and best hope, Jack Schlossberg. In a Kennedy generation that has largely peaked already, Jack is still primed for a big play. Jack is the son of Edwin Schlossberg and Caroline Kennedy, who is also a former ambassador, making him the grandson of the golden boy himself, John F. Kennedy. Jack Schlossberg is the archetypal Kennedy. Ivy League graduate, lawyer, liberal, and most importantly, hot. I'm not the only one who sees potential in the young Schlossberg, as he has clearly been groomed for a future in the Democratic Party. He served as a Senate page in his youth, worked in the U.S. Department of State as a staff assistant during the Obama administration, and even given speeches for some reason at the 2020 and 2024 Democratic National Conventions. For the 2024 election, he's helped campaign for Kamala Harris, posting videos with other big-name Democratic politicians to help drum up support among the youth. Unlike JPK3, he hasn't run for office yet, but it's important to make sure you don't blow your chances too early, so there's no problem. Jack Schlossberg isn't the type that you let languish away in the House of Representatives their whole career. He's got a face for TV and a bloodline that provides him with access to the halls of power. So we know where the Kennedys have been, and we know where we are. We have our man of history in the making, and now it's time to make it. Here's the plan. In Crusader Kings 3, your typical start finds you in a small independent county with a goal to build to a kingdom and maybe even eventually an empire, solidifying your family's place in history amongst the famous names we learn and subsequently forget after high school history class. Luckily, in our current day, our empire is already built. The United States, while in decline, still wields considerable economic, cultural, and military power, and is currently the only remaining superpower in the world. We've got hundreds of military bases across the planet, some in countries that most Americans have never even heard of at all. Our GDP still ranks highest in the world. Heck, California alone is the 5th largest economy in the world by itself. While we don't need to build our empire, we will need to build our influence within it in order to gain control. In the United States, that control is earned through the presidency, at least nominally. But how do we take it without a billionaire in the family? Simply by building up a base of support that is ripe for the taking, baby. In the United States, the average voter lacks class consciousness and critical thinking. Americans focus exclusively on aesthetics. How does this political candidate make me feel? Do they seem cool? For boomers, would I want to have a beer with them? For zoomers, would I let them hit my vape? It's going to be extremely important that we improve Jack Schlossberg's profile in order to appeal to the average voter. That brings us to stage 1 of our plan. Brand optimization. Our main branding issue is simply the name. Schlossberg. Sounds like a German leather goods brand that had untoward dealings during the 1930s and 40s in Germany. The last thing we want is a name that scans as European to an American voter. Our solution is simple. Jack needs to ascend to a higher form. Jack Kennedy. We luck out as Jack's full name is Jack Bouvier Kennedy Schlossberg. Rich people are going to make sure you know that pedigree, huh? So he already has the Kennedy name. We would just need to switch it to his primary last name. While changing your public name at 31 may seem weird, I think there's an easy way to spin this. In a time where women's rights are at the forefront of American politics, Jack could frame the choice to take his mother's maiden name as an act of feminist protest against the patriarchy. It's that sort of symbolic but decidedly non-radical act that liberals would absolutely eat up. It's important to know your audience, which is why our next move is to rile the base up even further. Every CK3 player knows it's important to secure your line of succession. That requires a politically fruitful marriage and production of heirs. Thankfully, our newly named Jack Kennedy is currently single and ready to mingle. There's a lot of fish in the sea, but we're going to need to find the best catch. We need someone that comes from a family with political influence either at or even above the level of Kennedy. We need someone conventionally attractive. We need someone age appropriate, of course. Simply put, we need someone that can match that Kennedy freak. Now, I know what you're thinking, friend, and I agree, that's a tall order. But do not worry, dear viewer, for that person does exist. And that person is Malia Obama. Did you just feel that? Just the name alone widened your eyes and quickened your heart's pace. Malia Obama is a Harvard graduate, model, writer, director, and most importantly, the eldest daughter of Barack Obama, one of the most iconic political figures of the early 21st century at this point. At the end of his presidency, Barack Obama had a 58% approval rating, according to Gallup. Fast forward to 2024, a survey conducted by YouGov showed he still had that juice, baby. He had a 57% favorability rating, and 53% of people said they were either very likely or somewhat likely to vote for Obama if he somehow ran in 2024. The kids love Obama, with 2/3 of respondents under 30 saying they would still vote for him. I'm honestly convinced the main reason Biden won in 2020 was because people were trying to just huff the last little bit of Obama fumes off him. Voters said, hell yeah, let's take the crazy white boy that was in all the pictures with the last candidate that actually got people excited to vote. A Kennedy-Obama pairing would be the American version of the royal wedding. Even non-political media would be plastering this news across the known world. All right, this political alliance not only gains his favor with the people, but Obama himself is still incredibly influential within the Democratic Party. In 2020, it said he had a hand in many of the Democratic primary candidates dropping out before Super Tuesday in order to clear the way for Biden to take the nomination, stopping the momentum Bernie Sanders had built up into that point. Additionally, he was one of the several high-ranking members of the Democratic Party that then got Biden to drop out of the presidential race in 2024. Probably a year too late, but all right, whatever. A marriage between these two would skyrocket Jack Kennedy 2.0 immediately to the top. Besides the marriage, I'm honestly kind of worried about the potential offspring with both Kennedy and Obama blood. A mixed Kennedy? The earth would quake in the wake of its birth. This being's aura alone would single-handedly fix the declining birth rates in developed nations. The sexual charisma alone would have women, men, and NBs fainting within a mile radius. Still, with our power couple forged, it's time to make our move to the next stage. Regional dominance. After the marriage uniting the Obama and Kennedy dynasties, it's time for our boy Jack to run for Senate. I think the best seat would probably be New York, his home state and home city. Chuck Schumer's seat is up next in 2029 when he would be 79 years old and hopefully ready for retirement. In the years leading up, we have some work to do. Following the usual Kennedy path, Jack can go ahead and take whatever open house seat in New York works best, building up a solid profile while waiting for either Schumer to die or retire. While we wait for that Senate seat in New York, we need to begin reestablishing Kennedy power elsewhere in the states. Our first step is to shore up our defenses at the ancestral Kennedy land of Massachusetts. We still have a regionally popular Kennedy available, our fallen JPK3. Thankfully, we have a shot at redemption after his failure in 2020. Ed Markey, his former primary opponent, will complete his current term in 2026 at the age of 80. Although Markey won the first round, we shouldn't count young-ish Joseph Kennedy III out. The degeneration of Joseph Biden over the past decade culminated in the presidential debate in June 2024, where millions watched as Biden's brains leaked out of his ears, literally and metaphorically. Such a disastrous performance forced the party to pressure Biden to drop out. Now, this video is recorded just after the 2024 election, and it can't be understated how much damage having a senile man being your candidate for nearly a year did to the Democrats' prospects at the top of the ticket. While I don't think Democrats enjoy learning, we may find ourselves in a world where the party may start being proactive and start to choose to replace aging politicians before it's too late. That means they may just take Markey up to that farm upstate come 2026. Joseph Kennedy III earned 44% of the vote in their primary matchup in 2020, so I don't think it'd be too crazy to say there's still a constituency ready for JP3 2.0. Worst case scenario, we look for Warren's seat in 2030, just after NY crowns Jack Kennedy as their junior senator in 2029. With the North won, it's time to take our eyes to the West. The Kennedys have been intertwined with Hollywood ever since OG John P. Kennedy practically owned half the town back in the 1920s. Although Kennedys have been involved in documentary filmmaking, not too many have graced the big screen. For us to take power in California, we will need to rely on one of the cadet houses of the Kennedys, the Schwarzeneggers. As we highlighted earlier in our breakdown of K5, Patrick Schwarzenegger is our biggest prospect out in the Golden State. As an actor, Patrick's biggest roles to date have been as recurring characters in lesser-known television series and also the lead in an Ariana Grande music video over a decade ago. We need a bigger profile and fast, both metaphorically and literally. Right now, Patrick Schwarzenegger is just really regular movie star buff. Low body fat, defined muscles, but can definitely still fit through doorways. It's time to get that boy on the juice, baby. Now, if we're to raise his profile, we need to understand where Hollywood is right now. Remakes. As the rate of profit decreases, movie executives and film studios are really trying to pull the trigger on guaranteed moneymakers. That means big name actors and well known properties from 40 years ago. According to IMDb's Box Office Mojo, the 10 highest grossing films at the box office in 2024 were all movie franchise sequels. We don't hit a movie with an original screenplay that wasn't adapted from a book until 19 on that list. Therefore, to jumpstart Pattius's bubbling career, I suggest we give him so much trembling that it makes his blood turn silver and get that man starring in a sequel to Conan the Barbarian with his father making a cameo. It doesn't need to make much sense for it to work. I mean, our Super Jack stars are aging in America, and it's time we manufacture some new ones. Once we get a couple Patrick Schwarzenegger remakes out of the way, we can definitely get Patrick started in politics. Now, while his father ran as a Republican, the smarter path lies with the Democrats. The last time a Republican wasn't smoked in a gubernatorial campaign was Arnold Schwarzenegger's election win almost 20 years ago, and we don't want that plan dying on the vine just because we are too insistent in following Daddy's footsteps. Now, to ensure Patrick's rise to power, we're going to take a play out of the old Gavin Newsom book, Become a Getty. The Gettys are a political powerhouse in California, with $1 billion fortune made in the oil business. The Gettys are intertwined extensively with our current governor, Gavin Newsom, having contributed a significant amount of money to his campaigns over the years. This makes them the perfect family to secure a political alliance with the old-fashioned way, marriage. And who might that lucky lady be? Meet 29-year-old Ivy Getty, who holds all the typical jobs a scion of an oil fortune typically does. Fashion model, aspiring music star, and socialite. Patrick and Ivy are both conventionally attractive and come from wealthy families, at different levels, of course, but it all looks the same from the bottom. So there's not much needed to make this a perfect match. Now, Patrick would have to break up with his current fiancée, unfortunately, but what's a broken heart compared to the establishment of the next Camelot? With a Getty in tow and a raised profile, Patrick's a shoo-in for the governorship, and the West has won. We've reestablished our foothold in the North and conquered the West. It's time we look towards the last major cultural region we have not secured influence in, the South. The Kennedy family has many intertwined political families stretching all across the United States, but the South is one area they haven't had much headway in. That's why when we make an alliance, we want to make sure we are making a statement. We need someone of sturdy stock, a rugged figure that can bring as much benefit to the Kennedys as the Kennedys would to him. The strength to secure the South for the Kennedys while also providing them with some cultural cachet they may not already have on their own. That man, ladies, gentlemen, and gentlemen, Gucci Mane. Gucci got close, that's the slang get Cleveland. I'm so gangster, he's so corny, I'm so Atlanta legend and music titan Gucci Mane has all of what we are looking for and more. Status, celebrity, and a vendetta with the Grim Reaper that he is winning. By allying ourselves with Mr. LaFleur, we gain the only hope of ending the Kennedy curse. Gucci has looked in the face of death and laughed, and the curse would stand no chance at all. Goo-Wop gives the dynasty basically an AoE protection buff from any interference from the string of tragedies the Kennedy has faced since its earliest days in America. All Jack really would need to do is find a willing unmarried Kennedy somewhere to secure the alliance, which shouldn't be too hard considering it's the trap god himself. With these major regions secured, there's not much stopping our newly crowned Jack Kennedy's rise to the presidency. With all the pieces in place, it's only a matter of time before the Democratic Party is begging for our Jack Kennedy to save them. The current Democratic bench is anemic, and it won't look better by the time our Jack Kennedy 2.0 is ready to run for presidency by the mid-2030s. If all goes according to plan, I imagine we could even get Jack in by 2032, maybe 2036, depending on how everything shakes out. All he needs to do once he wins Senate is milk that sweet TV time and sire as many heirs as possible. The Kennedy-Obama offspring will earn him more free coverage than he will know what to do with. Once he's walked into the White House, the Kennedy ascension will be complete. However, there's no reason to stop there. Sure, we will have earned the helm of the greatest empire known to history, but there's no reason to stop there. Obviously, we will need to properly manage the next American Kennedy generations to keep our dynastic root strong, but we shouldn't put all of our eggs in one basket. That is why we need to go global, baby. How do we do that? Deploy our Weapon X abroad. Let the world hear the voice of a generation and swoon. That's right, Mr. Golden Voice himself, RFK Jr. We've seen that even though he sounds like a transformer having a seizure, the man inexplicably has an undeniable success rate when it comes to women. That is why his job will be siring as many Kennedy bastards across the world as his wrinkled flesh can manage. There should be a Kennedy offspring everywhere a vehicle can reach. I want little RFKs running around communal fires of uncontacted Amazonian tribes. I want there to be a daycare full of RFKs in Antarctica. From there, Kennedy world domination can begin. But for now, I feel like my job is complete. I've rescued the Kennedy dynasty from total ruin and at least made things more interesting for the rest of us in the meantime. If you like what you see here, I do regularly stream over at twitch.tv/absentmindededition, all one word, which can all be found in the details below. Swipe down, I guess. I don't know. Until next time, free Palestine toes backwards, baby.